I didn't understand what it meant to be uninvited from your own life until I walked into Carter's apartment and found Sabrina sitting at his kitchen table like she'd never left. She was holding a mug I'd bought him, the blue one with a chip on the handle, the one I'd picked out at that little pottery shop on Maple Street because it reminded me of his eyes. And she was drinking from it like it was hers, like all of it was still hers. I'd been dating Carter for 14 months. 14 months of Sunday dinners at his mother Helena's house, of helping her fold napkins into swans for her famous dinner parties, of sitting through her pointed comments about how I organized the spice rack wrong. She never said anything outright cruel. It was always wrapped in that soft, maternal packaging. "Oh, Delilah, you put the cumin next to the cinnamon." Sabrina always kept the spices alphabetical, but I'm sure your way works too. Sabrina. Always Sabrina. Here's what I knew about Sabrina at that point. She and Carter had dated for 6 years. They'd broken up 8 months before he and I met. She was a dental hygienist with a laugh that apparently lit up rooms. Helena mentioned that laugh at least once a month. The breakup, according to Carter, was mutual. They'd just grown apart, wanted different things. He said it with the kind of shrug that suggested the whole thing was as exciting as discussing the weather. I believed him. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, and because up until that Saturday morning, he'd never given me a reason not to. The morning it happened, I'd let myself into his apartment with the key he'd given me 3 months earlier. He'd handed it to me on our anniversary, a little silver key on a keychain shaped like a lighthouse. "So you always know the way home," he'd said. I'd cried. Not because it was a key, but because for the first time in years, I felt like someone was building a door for me instead of holding one shut. I'd come over early to make him breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, the works, because the night before he'd gotten a promotion at work and I wanted to celebrate. I had grocery bags in both hands when I pushed the door open with my hip and heard the sound of someone humming in the kitchen. Not Carter. The humming was too high, too feminine, and the tune, I recognized it. It was a song Helena hummed constantly, one of those old folk songs she claimed was a family tradition, the one Sabrina had apparently learned. I froze in the hallway. The grocery bags cut into my fingers. And then I walked forward, because whatever was happening, I needed to see it. She was there, Sabrina, in sweatpants, in his apartment, on a Saturday morning at 7:30. She had her back to me, stirring something on the stove. The kettle was on. The table was set for 2. I said her name, just her name, and she turned around with this expression, not guilty, not surprised, almost patient, like she'd been waiting for this conversation for a while. "Oh," she said. "You must be Delilah. Helena said you might stop by." Helena said. Helena said. That was when I noticed the key rack by the door. Carter had one of those wooden key holders shaped like a tiny house, with little hooks. There were 4 hooks. 2 had keys, his and the lighthouse one I'd just used. One was empty, and the fourth held a key with a blue tag. On the tag, in handwriting I recognized from a dozen birthday cards and holiday notes, Sabrina, just in case. Helena's handwriting. I hadn't known in that moment that the key was only the beginning. I hadn't known that Sabrina had been coming over every Thursday when I worked late, letting herself in, tidying up, rearranging my things. I hadn't known that Helena had told Carter it was good for him to stay connected to his past, and that Carter had agreed. I hadn't known any of that, but standing there, holding my lighthouse key so tight it left a mark, I felt the ground shift under my feet. The question you ask yourself in a moment like that isn't, what do I do? It's, how long have I been the only one who didn't know? Around here, we don't just survive it, we understand it. Because when a woman like Helena puts a key in another woman's hand, and that woman isn't you, it's never just about a key. It's about who belongs. And I want you to stay with me, because what I did next, what I found out in the weeks that followed, would turn a key into a weapon. And I didn't even have to raise my voice. But before we get to the part where I took my life back, I need you to understand what kind of woman Helena really was, and what kind of man Carter turned out to be when his mother asked him to choose. I need to tell you about Helena first, because if you don't understand Helena, you won't understand why what happened next was so much worse than just a key. Helena was 61 years old, widowed for 12 years, and she ran her family the way a conductor runs an orchestra. Every note precisely where she wanted it. Every player aware that one wrong move would bring the whole thing to silence. She was charming. That's the thing about women like her. If you met her at a dinner party, you'd think she was lovely. Warm smile, great hostess, always remembered that you preferred sparkling water over still. She asked questions about your life. She remembered the answers. She made you feel like you mattered. And then, slowly, over months of Sunday dinners and birthday gatherings, you started to notice that her questions weren't questions. They were placements. Delilah, you're still working at that little nonprofit, aren't you? It must be so nice to have a job that doesn't demand too much, said with a smile, said in front of the whole table. And if you objected, if you even hinted that your work was demanding, her eyebrows would lift just slightly and she'd say, "Oh, of course, dear, I didn't mean anything by it." And suddenly you were the one who'd made things awkward. Carter was an only child. His father had died of a heart attack when Carter was 19, and since then, Helena had made him the center of her universe, and she expected him to return the favor. He called her every day. He took her to brunch every Sunday. When we started dating, I thought it was sweet. I thought it meant he knew how to love a woman well. What I didn't realize was that the position of woman in Carter's life was already filled. I wasn't applying for the role. I was auditioning for a part that didn't exist. The first time I met Helena, she hugged me at the door and said, "Oh, Carter, she's darling." She meant it the way you mean it when you call a child's crayon drawing creative. I told myself I was being sensitive. I'm a woman who was raised to give people the benefit of the doubt. My own mother had taught me that most people are good, most intentions are kind, and if someone upsets you, you should probably examine your own expectations first. I've since learned that some people see that generosity as a door left unlocked. The key incident wasn't the first red flag. I saw them now, in hindsight, lined up like warning lights I'd driven past without slowing down. The time Helena accidentally addressed a Christmas card to Carter and Sabrina. She'd laughed about it, said it was just habit, all those years of writing their names together. You know how it is, Delilah, muscle memory. The time she invited Sabrina to Carter's birthday dinner without telling either of us. Sabrina had shown up with a gift, the exact watch Carter had mentioned wanting 6 months earlier. Helena had told her what to buy. She'd been coaching her. The time I found a bottle of perfume in Carter's bathroom, and he'd said it must have been his mother's when she visited. It wasn't. It was Sabrina's. I'd learned that later, that Sabrina had a signature scent, something floral and heavy, and that she'd been there enough to leave a bottle behind. And then there was Carter. Sweet, gentle, conflict-averse Carter. The man who couldn't tell a waiter his order was wrong without apologizing 3 times. The man who said he loved me, but who never, not once, corrected his mother when she brought up Sabrina. "She's just lonely," he'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it. Don't make it a thing." Don't make it a thing. That was Carter's refrain. Don't make the key a thing. Don't make the Christmas card a thing. Don't make the birthday dinner a thing. And I didn't. Because I loved him, and because I thought love meant being easy. I thought being a good partner meant swallowing the small indignities so he didn't have to deal with them. I didn't understand that every time I swallowed, I was telling Helena she could feed me more. The morning I found Sabrina in the kitchen, after she said, "Helena said you might stop by," I didn't scream. I didn't throw the groceries. I set the bags on the counter very carefully, and I asked, "Does Carter know you're here?" She gave me this little smile, not mean exactly, but satisfied. "Oh, Carter and I talk every week. Helena's idea. She says it's healthy for us to stay connected. Closure, you know?" Closure. The closure involved a key to his apartment that his mother had given her. The closure involved Thursday morning visits while I was at work. The closure involved her reorganizing the pantry and folding his laundry and leaving little notes on the fridge. I'd seen those notes. Yellow sticky notes in neat, bubbly handwriting. "You're out of milk. Don't forget your dentist appointment." I'd assumed they were from his mother. They were from Sabrina. His mother was just the one who'd made sure she had a door to slip them under. I want you to hold on to that detail, the sticky notes, because I found one later that changed everything. One note that wasn't about milk or dentist appointments. One note that was for me, and I almost threw it away before I read it. The note was stuck to the inside of the cabinet where I kept my tea. Not on the outside, where anyone might see it. Inside, where only someone who was looking through my things would find it, or someone who knew exactly where to hide something for me and me alone. I found it 3 days after the kitchen confrontation. 3 days of Carter saying he was handling it, and talking to his mom, and setting boundaries. 3 days of me believing him. 3 days of Sabrina's key still hanging on that hook by the door. The note was yellow, same neat handwriting, same bubbly cursive. But this one wasn't about groceries. "Delilah, I know this is awkward, but I need you to understand something. Carter and I have a bond that didn't end when you started. Helena understands it. Carter understands it. I'm not trying to take him from you. I don't have to. Some doors were never closed. S." I read it 4 times. The first time, I felt the sting of it. The audacity of a woman who'd been letting herself into my boyfriend's apartment, telling me she wasn't trying to take him. The second time, I noticed the phrasing. Some doors were never closed. The third time, I wondered if Carter had seen this note too, if he'd read it and said nothing, if he'd left it for me to find. The fourth time, I understood what she was really telling me. This wasn't a warning. This was a recruitment letter. She was inviting me to accept the arrangement, to understand my place in the ecosystem Helena had designed. I was the girlfriend. She was the forever. And if I could just be cool about it, we could all coexist in Helena's beautiful, orchestrated world. She wasn't threatening me. She was onboarding me. I want to pause here, because this is the moment, right here, where women like us so often talk ourselves out of what we know. I almost did it. I almost told myself I was reading too much into it, that she was just awkward and bad with words, that I should be the bigger person. But around here, we don't just survive it, we understand it. And what I understood, standing in that kitchen with the note shaking in my hand, was that I had been given a gift. I had been given proof. Not proof of an affair, I still had no evidence of that, but proof of something almost more useful. Proof of intention. Proof that this wasn't in my head. Proof that Helena and Sabrina had a plan, and that plan required my cooperation. What I didn't know yet, what I wouldn't find out for another 10 days, was that the plan was much bigger than a key and a note and a few Thursday morning visits. Helena wasn't just keeping Sabrina in Carter's life. She was building a case. She was documenting. And she'd been doing it since the day Carter and I got serious. Here's what Helena had been up to, though I wouldn't have the full picture until later. She'd been telling Carter, gently, lovingly, with deep maternal concern, that I was unstable, that I was jealous, that my anxiety about Sabrina was a red flag. She'd been planting seeds for months. "Carter, honey, I just worry about you. Delilah seems so reactive. Remember how she got about the Christmas card? That wasn't normal." She'd been framing every reasonable objection I raised as evidence of my irrationality. Every time I asked Carter to set a boundary, Helena called it controlling behavior. Every time I cried, she called it emotional volatility. And Carter, conflict-averse, peacekeeping, raised by a conductor Carter, he'd been listening. Not all the way. He still loved me, still wanted the relationship, but the seeds were in the soil. When I said, "I'm uncomfortable with your ex having a key," Helena had already told him that a secure woman wouldn't be threatened by a key. When I said, "She left a note in my cabinet," Helena had already told him I was looking for things to be upset about. I wasn't fighting Sabrina. I was fighting a narrative that had been written before I even knew there was a war. And Sabrina was just the instrument. She wasn't clever enough to design this. She was following Helena's playbook, step by step. The casual drop-ins, the accidental perfume bottle, the note designed to make me react. The note was bait. Helena and Sabrina wanted me to confront Carter. They wanted me to seem unreasonable. They were waiting for me to be the problem. And I almost gave them exactly what they wanted. But something stopped me. Something I'd learned a long time ago from my grandmother. A woman who'd survived a mother-in-law who made Helena look like an amateur. "Never meet them on the field they've prepared," she used to say. "Let them think you're playing their game, and then change the rules." I didn't throw the note away. I photographed it. I dated it. I put it in a folder that would eventually hold so much more than a yellow sticky note with bubbly handwriting. And then I did something that felt completely wrong and completely right at the same time. I called Sabrina. Not to yell, not to threaten, to talk. Because if I was going to change the rules, I needed to know exactly who I was playing against. And what Sabrina told me in that conversation, what she let slip without even realizing it, was the thing Helena had been so careful to hide. I called Sabrina on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting in my car in the parking lot of the grocery store because I didn't want to make the call from Carter's apartment. I didn't want to make it from my place either. I wanted neutral ground. I wanted somewhere I could scream afterward if I needed to. She answered on the third ring. "Delilah, I was wondering when you'd call." Like we were old friends, like this was a coffee date. The woman had a gift for making the outrageous sound ordinary. I kept my voice calm. I told her I'd found her note. I told her I wanted to understand. Not in an angry way, just in a "let's be adults about this" way. I told her I wasn't calling to fight. And that's when she made her mistake. Because Sabrina, it turned out, liked to talk. She'd been waiting for this conversation. Helena had probably told her to be careful, to stick to the script, to say just enough and nothing more. But Sabrina wasn't Helena. Sabrina had an ego. And when I gave her an opening, when I said, genuinely curious, "I'm just trying to understand what the plan is here," she couldn't resist explaining it to me. Not the whole plan, just enough. Just enough for me to see the shape of it. "Look, Delilah, "I don't want to hurt you," she said. "But Carter and I have history. Real history. And Helena has always said that no one else will ever fit the family the way I do. She told me to be patient. She said things with you would run their course. She said things with you would run their course. Not, I hope things don't work out. Not, I still have feelings for him. Helena told me to be patient. Helena had a timeline. Helena was running a strategy. And Sabrina, sweet, not too bright Sabrina, had just handed me the architect's name in writing. Well, in voice. But I was recording, yes. I recorded the call. I live in a one-party consent state. I checked. I'd done my homework before I dialed. Because if I was going to fight this, I was going to fight it clean. And I was going to fight it with receipts. I asked her very gently, "What does patience look like for you, Sabrina? What are you actually waiting for?" And she told me. She told me that Helena had been working on Carter for months. Her words, not mine. Working on Carter meant planting doubts. It meant orchestrating moments where I looked difficult and Sabrina looked easy. It meant the key, the Thursday visits, the perfume bottle, the Christmas card. All of it, choreographed. Helena says men don't leave relationships, Sabrina said. They leave conflict. So we just had to make sure there was conflict. She said it like it was clever, like she was proud of it, like she thought I'd be impressed by the strategy. I wasn't impressed, but I was grateful, because she'd just given me everything. In the span of a 12-minute phone call, Sabrina had confirmed that Helena was orchestrating a campaign to undermine my relationship, and that Carter, whether he fully understood it or not, was being systematically manipulated by his own mother. The key wasn't just about access. It was about creating evidence. Every time Sabrina was in that apartment, Helena could say to Carter, "See? Sabrina is here, helping, caring for you. And Delilah is upset about it. Who's the reasonable one here?" I ended the call with Sabrina by thanking her. I meant it. I thanked her for her honesty, and I told her I'd think about everything she'd said. She sounded almost disappointed that I wasn't angry. She'd wanted the fight. Helena had wanted the fight. They'd been trying to provoke one for months, and I kept not giving it to them. After I hung up, I sat in the car for a long time. The recording was saved on my phone. The folder in my bag held the note, screenshots of texts from Helena, photos of Sabrina's key on the hook. I wasn't just collecting evidence against Sabrina. I was building a file on Helena. Because I'd realized something in that phone call. Something that had been right in front of me the whole time. Sabrina wasn't the problem. Helena was. Sabrina was just a tool. And if I was going to solve this, I couldn't just remove the tool. I had to address the hand that was wielding it. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because before I could do any of that, I had to tell Carter. I had to sit down with the man I loved and play him a recording of his ex-girlfriend explaining, in her own voice, how his mother had been manipulating him for months. I had to watch him choose between the woman who wanted to control him and the woman who just wanted him to see clearly. And here's the thing about confronting someone with proof. You think the hard part is gathering the evidence. It's not. The hard part is watching what they do with it. The hard part is realizing that some people would rather stay blind. I asked Carter to come over on a Wednesday, not our usual night. I told him I needed to talk about something important, and I asked him to please not tell his mother where he was going. That last part, I said it gently, but I said it. And the fact that he had to think about it, even for a second, told me how deep the roots went. He showed up with flowers, pink roses, my favorite. He'd remembered. He always remembered the small things. That was the tragedy of Carter. He was thoughtful in 100 tiny ways that made you believe he was fully present, fully yours. But the big things, the loyalty, the boundary setting, the willingness to see his mother clearly, those were locked away in a room Helena had the only key to. I sat him down at my kitchen table, the same table where, 6 months earlier, he told me he loved me for the first time. I made tea. I gave him a mug without a chip in it. And then I told him everything. Not in a rush, not in anger. I laid it out like a case file, because in a way, it was. I told him about finding Sabrina in his apartment, about the key with Helena's handwriting, about the Thursday visits I'd confirmed with a neighbor who'd seen her coming and going, about the note in my tea cabinet. And finally, I played him the recording. There's something surreal about watching someone you love listen to a voice they used to love explain how they've been weaponized. Carter's face went through stages: confusion, discomfort, and then, when Sabrina said, "Helena told me to be patient," something I'd never seen before. Not anger, not exactly. It was more like the slow, dawning horror of someone realizing they've been asleep at the wheel for months while someone else was driving. He didn't speak for a long time after the recording ended. The tea steamed between us. The kitchen clock ticked. I didn't push. I'd learned by then that pushing a man like Carter only made him retreat further into the shell his mother had built for him. So I waited. Finally, he said, "She wouldn't do this." I closed my eyes, not because I was angry, because I was exhausted. Because I'd spent 14 months trying to be the woman who made fewer demands than his mother, who asked less, who made things easier. And here I was, with a recorded confession, and his first instinct was still to defend her. She wouldn't do this. Not, "I can't believe she did this." Not, "I'm so sorry." Not, "I'm going to call her right now." Just denial, wrapped in loyalty, tied with a bow. And this is where I need to be honest with you. Because around here, we don't just survive it, we understand it. The moment I heard those 4 words, I knew there was a real possibility I was going to lose. Not because I didn't have the truth on my side, not because I hadn't done the work, but because Carter's whole life had been a training program in doubting his own perceptions. Helena had spent decades teaching him that she was the reasonable one, the loving one, the one who only ever wanted what was best. She'd built her voice into the architecture of his mind. And my voice, the voice of a woman he'd known for 14 months, couldn't compete with a lifetime of wiring. But here's what happened next. Something I didn't expect. Carter didn't shut down. He didn't leave. He didn't call me crazy or accuse me of making things up. He just sat there, staring at the phone I'd played the recording on. And after a very long silence, he said, "Play it again." So I did. And the second time, I watched his face change. The denial cracked. Something else came through. Something that looked a lot like grief. Grief for the mother he thought he had. Grief for the relationship he thought he'd left behind. Grief for the version of his life where everyone meant well and no one was being manipulated. He reached across the table and took my hand. Not to apologize, that would come later. Just to hold on. Just to ground himself. But this story is not a fairy tale. And the problem with dismantling a woman like Helena is that she doesn't just let you win. When Carter went home that night, after telling me he believed me, after promising he would talk to his mother, Helena was already 2 steps ahead. She'd known something was shifting. Sabrina had probably called her the minute our conversation ended. And Helena, the conductor, was already preparing her symphony. The following Monday, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was an attorney. Not Helena's attorney, Carter's attorney. A man named Philip, who explained in a very measured voice that Carter's mother had filed a petition, and I needed to be aware of it. She wasn't suing me. She was filing to become Carter's financial conservator, claiming he was emotionally compromised and vulnerable to manipulation by a romantic partner with a documented history of erratic behavior. The romantic partner was me. The documented history was every time I'd cried in front of Helena, every text I'd sent asking Carter to set a boundary, every moment of reasonable distress she'd reframed as instability. The folder I'd been building, the note, the recording, the photos, it wasn't just my weapon, it was my shield, and I was going to need it. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. 3 weeks of Helena calling Carter every day, crying, explaining, rewriting. 3 weeks of Sabrina showing up at his door with homemade soup and gentle reminders that she'd never put him through something like this. 3 weeks of me sitting in my apartment, binder of evidence ready, wondering if the man I loved was strong enough to stand up to a lifetime of strings. The morning of the hearing, I wore navy blue. Not black, I wasn't in mourning. Not red, I wasn't trying to send a message. Navy blue, calm, credible, the color of someone who had nothing to hide. Carter met me outside the courthouse. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. But he was there. That was the first thing that mattered. He was there, and he wasn't standing next to his mother. We walked in together. Helena was already seated, dressed in pale gray, clutching a handkerchief. Sabrina sat beside her, one hand on Helena's arm, the picture of devoted, almost daughter-in-law. They'd dressed for a funeral. Mine, presumably. The attorney Philip, Carter's attorney, the one Helena had hired for him, presented the petition. He used phrases like concerned family member, documented pattern of emotional instability, acting in his best interest. Helena dabbed her eyes on cue. It was a performance, every beat rehearsed. And then our attorney, a sharp woman named Valerie I'd found through a domestic abuse advocacy group, because yes, this qualified, stood up and asked to submit evidence to the court. She submitted the note, the photos of the key, the text messages, and the recording. We played the recording. The courtroom was silent as Sabrina's voice filled the room. Helena told me to be patient. We just had to make sure there was conflict. Helena says men don't leave relationships, they leave conflict. The words that had made me feel sick in my car now sounded different. They sounded like what they were: conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, a coordinated campaign. I watched Helena's face as the recording played. She didn't cry anymore. Her expression went very still. The mask didn't slip. Women like Helena don't crack in public. But something behind her eyes went cold. She'd spent months building a narrative, and in 4 minutes of audio, it collapsed. But here's what I didn't expect. After the recording ended, Carter stood up. His attorney tried to stop him, but Carter shook his head. He asked the judge if he could speak. And the judge, an older woman with a face that had seen decades of family dysfunction, nodded. Carter's voice shook, but he said, "My mother filed this petition without my consent. I am not incapacitated. I am not emotionally compromised. I am a man who has been lied to by the person I trusted most, and I am asking this court to dismiss this petition and to note on the record that it was filed in bad faith." He didn't look at Helena when he said it. He looked at me. The judge dismissed the petition. She called it a disturbing misuse of the conservatorship process. She recommended that Carter seek independent counsel. She looked at Helena, actually looked at her, and said, "The court takes no pleasure in witnessing what appears to be a pattern of coercive control disguised as maternal concern." Those words went into the permanent record. Helena left the courtroom without speaking to anyone. Sabrina trailed after her, her face a study in confusion. She'd been promised a victory and handed a defeat, and she didn't seem to understand how the plan had failed. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She'd been a tool, and tools get discarded when the job doesn't get done. Carter and I sat on the courthouse steps afterward. The sun was out. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary. The kind of day that shouldn't feel monumental, but does anyway. He apologized, not just for the hearing, but for all of it. For the months of making me feel crazy. For the key he never took back. For asking me to swallow every indignity so he wouldn't have to face his mother. He said he was going to start therapy. He said he was going to learn how to be a person separate from her. I believed him. But I also told him I needed time. Because here's what I learned through all of this. Love isn't enough if the person you love hasn't learned how to protect you. Carter had stood up in that courtroom, and it was brave, and it mattered. But I'd spent 14 months fighting a war I didn't start, and I needed to heal from that before I could decide if I wanted to stay in a relationship that had required so much proof just to be believed. We hugged. He kept the lighthouse key. I didn't ask for it back. Not yet. Here's what happened afterward. Helena tried to spin the narrative. Called relatives, told them I'd manipulated Carter, that the recording was doctored, that she was the real victim. Some people believed her. They always do. But the court record told the truth. The binder of evidence told the truth. And Carter, for the first time in his life, was learning to listen to his own voice instead of hers. Sabrina disappeared from his life. The key was returned. The Thursday visits stopped. And Helena was left with the one thing she'd spent her whole life avoiding. Consequences. Around here, we don't just survive it. We understand it. And what I understand now is that some battles aren't won by screaming. They're won by documenting. By staying calm long enough to let the other side reveal themselves. By refusing to be the villain in a story someone else wrote for you. Helena tried to make me the problem. Instead, she handed me the evidence I needed to prove exactly who she was. You were never too sensitive. The room was just never safe enough. And if you're in a room like that right now, if someone is telling you you're difficult or jealous or unstable when all you're doing is asking for basic respect, I want you to remember something. You don't have to win the argument. You just have to keep the receipts. The firelight is always on. If this story hit something raw for you, you're not watching this alone. There are thousands of women in these comments who have been exactly where you are. Drop a heart emoji if you've ever had to prove something that should have been believed without evidence. And if you haven't subscribed yet, pull up a chair. We talk about the hard things here, and we do it together. I'll see you next time.